Hello, I'm Laurie Norton, and I am doing the summary of Chapter 5 in About Behaviorism by B.F. Skinner. This summary is, the chapter is entitled Perceiving. Before I get started, let me just go ahead and say it seems Skinner is very, very wordy, and I don't believe I'm quite as wordy as Skinner. But I'm going to get started in trying to give you my summary of this chapter. According to Skinner, a traditional view is a person responds to the world around them by acting upon it. And a person cannot really capture the real world, but they can make memories and retrieve them. In radical behaviorism, the environment stays outside the body. So in the first couple of sections of this chapter, perceiver or receiver and stimulus control of operant behavior. The summary of both of these little sections of the book is when behavior occurs, it's very intertwined with the consequences or the reinforcement. We respond to situations based on what has occurred in the environment previously. Skinner gives us an example of this in his chapter when he talks about a driver and a passenger. And he talks about how the driver, the way they're reacting and what they're doing is different than what the passenger is doing, even though they're in the same environment. The driver has to pay attention to the exits. They have to pay attention to where to turn. They have to pay attention to traffic signals. They have to pay attention to speed. While the passenger can sit passively and not interact that way in the environment. They could be listening to music. They could be reading a book. So although they're in the same environment, the way they react to it may be different. And a passenger may not be able to then recall the route and get you back to where you need to be. This is when the stimulus is vague are weak. So for the driver, the stimulus was strong. So they had a different reaction and were able to recall their route and may be able to tell you how to get back and forth. Whereas to the passenger, the stimulus was weak or vague. And so they're not able to tell you how to get back and forth and what they need to do. He also gave an example in this section of a chess player walking up on a game of chess. When you know how to play chess and you walk up on a game of chess in progress, especially if you're like a chess master, you will look at that game board and you will see moves that can be made. You can see exactly how to win that game and the exact move and anticipate what each player is going to do. Whereas a person who does not play chess, they're going to walk up to that board and just see pieces on a board. So both of them react to the same stimulus and the same environment in a different way. So this would say that behavior is not controlled by the setting, but by the stimulus response. And this is contingencies of reinforcement. The contingencies of reinforcement on the driver or the chess master is different than the contingencies of reinforcement on the passenger or the person who doesn't know how to play chess. In the next couple of sections, it's called Conditions Affecting What is Seen and Experience versus Reality. And there can be a great difference between experience versus reality. People may react differently to stimuli based on how they have previously been experienced to the stimuli and how they previously have felt with the stimuli. Perceptions go beyond what is actually seen and kind of relies on how information and how we feel about things and how we've stored that information from past situations. This section talks about remembering and reminiscing and how people can respond to that in different ways. I've often seen people that have been in the same situation and they can remember a situation in two totally different ways. And that's because both of them reacted to that situation in a different way. So according to Skinner, this would mean that behavior is not controlled directly by the stimuli, but according to how the brain has processed the data and how it controls and in the data it's collected and how it processed that data. In this section, it made me think about a clown and how people react to clowns differently. Some people see clowns as something fun and happy, and other people see clowns as something very, very scary. So people can respond in a different way. So two children at the very same birthday party can have a very different experience when the clown walks in the room. One may run up to the clown and see it as a happy thing, while one may run away from the clown in fear. And that is because of how their brain has stored the data from how they have been presented with that stimuli in the past. The next section in this chapter is called the copy theory. And the copy theory is that we see copies of the world and that we never really actually see the world itself. This is very difficult for my little mind to understand. But in this chapter, in this section, he talks about when people dream or they engage in fantasy, that they're not under control of the current stimuli. And it made me think about sitting in a lecture and how some people are sitting there very engaged, and another person can look engaged, but they may be daydreaming or they may be making their grocery list. And so they're engaged into that and that same stimuli in a different way. And so they're seeing a copy, and it has to do with the history of how they've interacted with that environment in the past, that we get the answer for how they react to that. The next couple of sections is called Seeing in the Absence of Things Seen and Mind and Stimulus Control. And people tend to produce stimuli that they see as reinforcing. In this chapter, Skinner talks about the city of Venice and how someone may find that particularly reinforcing. So they may want to go to Venice to be reinforced, but if they can't actually go to Venice to get that reinforcement, they can still interact with some stimuli about Venice. They can have pictures of Venice. They can read about Venice. And with technology advancements, there's all sorts of things that's made it easier for people to be reinforced by something that they may actually not be able to engage with in that environment. It talks about seeing things, that when we see things in their absence, not because we're reinforced, but that we see it because we engage in the behaviors that are reinforcing. So we see things and we go to places in our mind that are reinforcing to us. Think of people in stressful situations that say that they went to a happy place in their mind to keep them away from the stressful situation that they were in. This section also states that the mind can stand for the person who perceives. And we often think, and so in this section, it talks about how we often think of someone who's not in touch with reality as someone whose mind may wander. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be totally out of touch with reality. It's like walking around with someone who could walk into a pole. Like their mind was wandering. They were away from something. And sometimes you're walking by somebody and you see that they don't see the pole right in front of them. And you go, hey, there's a pole right there. And so that's to remind them that it's not that they're right there beside you, but in their mind, they were away someplace else. And so we see them as their minds wandering. When working, but we also work with people who, that we tell, like when we work with people who we think are delusional, we would often say that they are not in their right mind, or we'll tell them that's not right there. That's not what you're seeing. What you're saying you're seeing is not really here. The only experience that, or the real experience I can think of with that is I had the blessing to be with both of my grandparents when they passed away. And both of them, I can remember my grandfather, he kept telling me he could see his mother, and he wanted me to know, and he would ask me, can you see my mama? I couldn't see his mother, but he could see his mother. My grandmother asked me, can you hear the hymns? It's a beautiful hymn, and who is playing and who is singing that hymn? And it was a beautiful hymn, and she could tell me the name of the hymn, and she was telling me how beautiful it sounded, and I couldn't hear that. And so I feel like they both were able to hear and see things in their final moments, that their mind was recalling something that was not actually in their environment. But I couldn't hear it because I was right there with them, but they heard it and they saw it. And so there are times that people can see and hear things that maybe aren't, is their mind and the way their mind is pulling up what they've experienced in the past. Skinner also talks about dreaming, and he talks about how sometimes when you're sleeping, you wake up and the dream seems very, very vivid to you because you didn't actually experience it, it sometimes disappears quickly, and then you can't remember that dream. I know I've had times that I wake up and I think I'm going to remember this dream, I'm going to tell somebody about it, and then I can't remember it 2 hours later. I guess it's because I really didn't experience it. So that is my brief little summary of this chapter, and now I'm going to leave you with an open-ended question. And what kept going through my mind as I was reading this chapter is, I believe Dr. Phil is where I've heard it. Now, whether he's the one who originally said it or not, but I've often heard it said, your perception is your reality. And so after reading this chapter, what are your views on the quote that your perception is your reality? Is your perception really your reality, or is perception something totally different? Thank you.